A blind Florida man has gotten his gun back after shooting his friend to death. This is just insane. And it is yet another perversion of justice in Florida based on specifically stand your ground laws, even though he said he didn't want to do it. A judge in Seminole County, Florida, was forced to return a Glock pistol and a rifle to a blind man who won immunity for killing another man under the state's stand your ground law. This was a surreal hearing. It took place in Seminole County Courthouse in Sanford, the city where Trayvon Martin was killed and the shooter was ultimately set free, George Zimmerman. John Wayne Rogers was accused of premeditated first-degree murder for shooting a, quote, drinking buddy in March of 2012 after, quote, a long drinking session, according to the Orlando Sentinel. The killing was done once in the chest with a .308 Remington assault rifle from a distance of 18 inches or less, but there were differing accounts of the shooting, and a judge ended up dismissing the jury altogether and awarding the shooter, Rogers, immunity under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. That led to the hearing just a few days ago where Judge John Galuzzo reluctantly admitted under the law, under Stand Your Ground, once you have been granted immunity by Stand Your Ground, you are entitled to have the firearms used in the standing of your ground back. Of course, this is also a blind individual. I don't think that anyone has a way of proving, let me put it a different way. It's questionable whether this guy should even have these weapons at all. I know a lot of people defend the rights of those who are blind to have guns, and they say, well, it's different than driving. Driving is not a constitutionally protected right, okay? So if you're blind and you can't drive, that's okay. However, we do have a Second Amendment, and therefore, even if you're blind, that's not a reason why you shouldn't be able to own guns. Now, many people disagree, saying that they're in the same way that you can restrict at what age you can get guns or what the licensing process is, there would be nothing wrong at all with saying if you are blind, then you can't have a gun. People will counter that and say, well, there are blind people who do shooting competitions and they do just fine than them. Okay, so we can go back and forth about that. This specifically about Stand Your Ground, though, Lewis, has led to absurd Florida situations where a blind guy who killed his friend gets his guns back and doesn't have any, pays no penalty at all.
I think Stand Your Ground, you should not be able to use Stand Your Ground if there are only two people involved in the incident and one kills the other. I think if for it to be Stand Your Ground, there should have to be a third party who witnesses what happens so that they can confirm that Stand Your Ground is valid.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. I mean, in the same way that self-defense statutes don't require third-party witnesses, it's just never going to happen with Stand Your Ground. I understand exactly what you're saying, because when you have somebody who stands their ground and their victim is no longer alive to tell the story, like in the case of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, even though I am aware that ultimately Stand Your Ground doctrine was not part of the case. You don't have two sides of the story, and therefore, how do we really know what happened? This has always been the case with self-defense claims, and it's just an ongoing problem. The bigger, more specific, acute problem is what is happening in Florida with gun laws and the just absurd crime after absurd crime in Florida.
It's nonstop. I mean, now people know that if it's just them and one other person alone, that it's almost certain that they can get away with murdering that person, and that's not a good thing.
You were standing your ground. There's nobody there to say otherwise. Fortunately, legally, no crime was committed here. So I guess, we've got that going for us. Let's take a quick break. Please check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/David Pakman. That's patreon.com/David Pakman. Back after this.